Here.
Following the war, all these bases had to be put back into farming land. But because the Americans were mass producers, like the idea came in. In fact, you see that van that we saw today, from Bale Livestock. They were like one of the first people with American companies that were putting big sheds for poultry up.
Ah, right, yeah.
We've already got your bases, you've got all these bases here. It's the bloke called Twydale, because turkey's a big thing in America. He decided to put loads of turkey sheds up, and he were buying out the airfields.
All the airfields.
To put them all on, because the foundations are in all the roads and everything. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. There's hundreds of these bases up this east coast. If you imagine all these Lancasters lined up here, say 50 of them, it took over an hour to get them all.
I'll say, yeah, that's there's some movement.
A minute, I think it was something like a minute. But they were ticking over here, the fuel that they had to put on to be lining up, to be run all the way out, to go round and round, area, and then whoosh up and away. Yeah. Amazing. They said there could be like an hour and a half sending planes out.
No, they said it's about the amount of fuel they was taking.
Yeah. What's that?
Say we might have to pull two tables together.
Well, I'll take that off your hands, sir.
No problem.
Could you do a special tour on Saturday morning? Because some guys who are on YouTube want to go inside, and so that's all I know.
Right.
And so I'm here for you.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, that's probably it in a nutshell, really. Yeah. What? So these chaps belong to a group. You correct me if I'm wrong anywhere. Called Motourev. And they'll be very modest, but they happen to have a really big following on YouTube. It's all mainly about motorbike touring, but they have a real deep interest and respect for World War II. Yeah. And have done 2 European tours dedicated to one to Normandy, D-Day landing sites, and the other one to Oradar to visit the martyred village there. Yeah. So in our chats, we all have a bit of a passion for World War II as well, and we kind of said, look, you guys should come over to us. We'll show you bomber counting basically on a bike tour, and you can't do that without coming here, can you?
No.
So this is a surprise to us. So all we know was we was coming up here, and they've all got. I said, don't tell us what we're going to do. We'll find out what happens today.
And then I'm glad.
Yeah.
So this is this family owned?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
The Panton family own this. It's actually so it's RAF East Kirkby.
Yeah.
That we're sitting on the old watchtower there. Later in 1944, they were then changed to include control towers. So a change in emphasis from watching aircraft to controlling.
Right. Yeah.
So we're on the old RAF East Kirkby, which was a Lancaster base, 1943 through to 45. At the end of the war, in the 1960s, so the Panton family came here, and it's their chicken farm. But the reason that we've got a Lancaster here is because the 2 elder brothers in the Panton, the 2 younger brothers in the Panton family, Fred and Howard, their elder brother was killed in a raid over Nuremberg, March 30th, 31st, 1944. And they wanted a memorial. Now, we kind of like think of memorial.
Yeah.
And
Well, at least.
memorial.
Absolutely.
They thought, big time. And so they ended up buying a Lancaster. And then they built a hangar, put the Lancaster in.
So where would you buy a Lancaster from? It's not in Auto Trade or anything like that, is it? Or a marketplace?
It was an auction in 1972 that she was put up for auction. She was the last flying Lancaster.
So was that auction from the RAF?
No, she had been built to go down to the Far East, never made it to the Far East, and so because she was built late in the war. And so she was put into storage, and then the French purchased her out of storage, and she worked in Morocco and New Caledonia in the Pacific, and this group of guys called the Historic Aircraft Preservation Society, which, as far as I'm concerned, is like we're probably, we could have put that name on, taken that name ourselves, except we're not in a pub doing the organising, because it just sounds like a group of guys in a pub.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think we can get one of these French aircraft which is being retired? So they wrote to the French, and the French they agreed a price, and so they flew her for a few years, but never really put together a business plan to make her so that she could survive financially. And then after that, she ended up in the auction. She didn't come here immediately. The Pantons failed to purchase her, but they knew the person who had purchased her, and 10 years later they got her. And she came here, and since she came here in '88, it has been a long, slow process of getting her back into the air. Because once an aircraft stops flying, then you have to prove that the aircraft is fit to get back into the air, as opposed to if she can keep the aircraft flying all the way along, you can sort of demonstrate.
It's flying's proving it, isn't it?
It is, yes. So
I'd imagine now, anything what's got to be done, what's not repairable made, it's got to be manufactured, hasn't it?
It's made by hand.
Like, go online and say, there's a tailpiece.
Yeah.
eBay, No. So yes, so where they were stamping things out of the metal, we're having to work out what the piece of metal looked like flat, cut it out by hand.
Yeah, you got to back engineer it, haven't you?
And hammer it to shape to the approval of the Civil Aviation Authority.
Yeah, because there's going to be some authority involved, isn't there?
Oh,
there's going to be an authority involved.
The man that signs that ticket has got a lot of weight on his shoulders, hasn't he? A lot of responsibility.
And I suppose it's like, I suppose a car manufacturing. I mean, you would have had people's job would have been, all they do is this one bit.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be working on the entire plane and having to understand it.
Yeah.
Wow.
The Americans mechanised the production, didn't they?
Yeah.
When they came and they brought the methods of, like you saw them at.
Yeah.
They know about production and how to do it quickly, like the tanks and everything.
So that's one of the reasons why the Packard engine is a more reliable engine than the Rolls-Royce Merlin. The Rolls-Royce Merlin was built, and then as soon as we got it started, effectively built it by hand.
Yeah.
Then that was straight into, actually we need 500 of these. When do you need them? Well, next week. And so we never really got round to building the production lines. We got round to productionizing particular parts of it, but never got to the production line where you start here and at the end you get the engine, or the end you get. I mean, we see bits that with the Lancaster where we see them being assembled, but it's basically the final assembly that is done there because we're doing it in small factories all around the country.
Breakfast.
For the breakfast, you're on breakfast, Craig, and Jeremy as well.
Thank you.
So how far off are we, Jeremy, from...
I think we're probably another 5 years. Something like that. Andrew will probably tell you a different story. He might be either longer or shorter, I'm not sure. But we're really now starting to get into the challenging part of the rebuild.
Yeah.
Having learned how to do the various bits on it, where because we take off a wing, we rebuild it, and then and since that's the first time we've rebuilt a wing, then we will be unhappy with it. Now, the way that we're doing it at the moment is we're rebuilding everything twice because we're learning on somebody else's aircraft. We've borrowed pieces from other museums so we can put them onto Just Jane, rebuild them, put them onto Just Jane, having learnt how to do a rebuild on it, and then we rebuild ours to a flying standard, where we've learnt it wasn't quite right. So the museum that we borrowed it from gets back a better exhibit. And we've learnt on somebody else's, and we know that ours is going to be the right standard.
So what got you involved with East Kirby then, Jeremy?
love of aircraft. My dad was a pilot in the RAF in Spain, an intruder. He flew Mosquito, got a running Mosquito.
Yeah.
Loved Second World War aircraft. I started, as I say, training to be a pilot in the Air Force. I failed 10 hours before my wing, which was a bit of a sad day.
Oh, wow.
But I still got to fly jets and things. So,
Fantastic.
and so as I got towards the end of my working life, I thought, what could I do? And I can come here and start doing some volunteering.
And get to meet a bunch of reprobates like us on a Saturday morning. That
Well,
you've given
everybody actually is lovely.
But it doesn't feel like work.
No, I think I'm the luckiest person alive to be allowed to play with a Lancaster.
Wow, yeah. When he told Goose, he came back and said, well, as it happens, when Goose were younger, he used to like play with, Lancaster models. He had models and that. I said, well, he's going to have to play with proper Lancaster now. Literally.
I feel this is going to be sold.
So the Lancaster Bomber, was that built for World War II?
Yeah.
So obviously, so the war had already started. You think you've got to research, develop, test something, and actually get it in production while the war's going on.
Right, the Lancaster, Roy Chadwick designed the Lancaster. But what he actually designed first was a twin-engine bomber called the Manchester, which is substantially similar to this. The Manchester was lackluster. It didn't do. I mean, it didn't fly great. It didn't have quite the range. It didn't have quite the bomb load. And so, I think it was in 1940 when the Manchester was just coming into service. It was kind of like, boy, good job, but. And then, well, maybe to make the wings a bit bigger, we put 4 engines in instead of 2. We changed the tail a bit, make it so it can carry a larger bomb load. And that
was the birth of it.
And then in 1941, the first of the Lancasters flew. 42, they came in squadron service. And basically, that was it.
So I mean, that's no time, is it? Well, you think there's something like the Eurofighter? It's like 19 years in development.
Yeah.
So the guys who would have been in. So what would their training have been like? Would they have been part of its development?
No.
I'm trying to think of like a test pilot kind of thing. Or would they have just built it, got it working, and say, right, we now show you how to use it?
Yes. Absolutely. In the war, developing the aircraft. There was a small RAF unit that did acceptance testing. They were down at Boston Down, which was then at Grass Airfield.
Yeah.
But basically, it was the company that developed them, and the company then had to prove the quality of them, so that the RAF or the procurement organisation would buy them, and they'd say, "I really like it. I'll have 100, and I want them in 7 months' time."
Yeah.
That sort of thing. Done.
Yeah.
So there were, I think, 7,377 Lancasters built during the war. Which is,
You don't know how many was lost.
and there is a number somewhere, but I don't know. I was a little nervous actually, thinking, it's going to be recorded. so I've actually written down some key numbers.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Good.
because I was thinking, I don't want this to come back in years later.
Because obviously,
You always get that one little comment. Actually,
Yes,
I mean, obviously after the war, you would have had so many of them still grounded, and obviously with the 3 we know of.
Yeah.
So what would have happened? Would they just been dismantled and
they were
scrapped?
Well, the aluminium was melted back down, put in scrap. The engines were cut off, and I mean, we ended the war as a virtually bankrupt country.
Yeah. And I was thinking, wouldn't it? This would have gone back into.
Yeah, we were kind of talking about this last night, weren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you say, we need all those materials back, won't we?
Yes. When we were kids, our parents used to put every single milk bottle top in a jar, and we, as kids, took them to the school where they were collected once a
So were
term.
metal, wasn't they?
Yes,
It was on
the
corrugated rounds.
aluminium
Yeah.
cups, because we needed the aluminium that much. So it would, and that was why things like Blue Peter in the 1950s and 60s, the television program, was so important. It actually did, encourage children
Yeah.
to make sure that stuff went into recycling.
That's crazy.
So we've just been sat with Jeremy. We've been firing questions at him left, right and centre about this Lancaster Bomber. And what the little surprise Gavin and Tony's arranged is we're going to go and see it. And it's in there, inside that hangar. I think we're having a bit of a VIP tour of it. This is going to be amazing. Absolutely amazing. But this place is phenomenal. And speaking with Jeremy, you could just sit, I could sit days, night after night after night, just listening to questions. Even finding out how these planes were built, what went into it, and you think nowadays everything's just thrown in a computer, get something designed, get it built on a 3D printer, and amazing. So yeah, so we got like a little bit of a VIP tour. We didn't know we was having that, so we thought we was just gonna obviously open the hangars and we'd come out here and take a few photos of it. So well excited. Let's have a look.